Well, good morning. It's so wonderful that we can come together here at Radiant Church on this glorious Sunday morning. It's great to be back live instead of on the chair in the living room. And it's great to be just being with the Lord and having our morning here today. If this is your first time here, I want to extend a very warm welcome. We're excited to have you as part of this community here today. Now, there's an old saying. And this old saying goes, today is the first day of the rest of your life. Now, this is a nice way of saying what it's basically saying is that every day is a new day. It's a day to start fresh. It's a time to start over. And we need that reminder today, especially today, with everything that's going on in the world today, that today is the first day of the rest of your life. It's a day to start over, to rebuild, to reconstruct, and that's what we're going to be looking at. Because over the past 2 years, we have all faced many struggles and disruptions to our lives. When the pandemic first hit, everything closed down for what we thought was going to be a week or so, but it lasted a lot longer. There were many who are still dealing with working from home and doing many things online that we once did in person. Now, there are many who they prefer to work from home, and that's great if that's what you want to do. Okay, but if that's not what you want to do, and you're in a situation where you're not able to get out of it, that can be stressful. So that's where some people find themselves today. We're still dealing with many things that we've been dealing with over the past 2 years because of the pandemic. Now, and through it all, we've experienced a distance in our relationships. And we also have a diminished sense of community because we've been distanced from one another. We've been scattered from one another in a sense. We've been keeping apart. Now, for some, what has been lost over the past 2 years has affected them in many negative ways. There are those of us who've lost loved ones to COVID. I know here at Radiant Church, the week after Easter, we had the funeral for Stephanie Donnelly. Stephanie was a part of our congregation here at Radiant Church. She helped us set up in the mornings, and she helped us with our peach cobbler sales. But she got COVID, and she spent the better part of a year struggling, and then it finally took her life. So, it's been a hard couple of years. And I know that all of us just want to get back to normal. But we are having trouble remembering what normal really is. Things have changed. We can't just pick up where we left off 2 years ago. People have changed. People have moved on. So now we are left to figure out what normal is going to be moving forward. So now we have to rebuild. And we are in some ways all under construction as we rebuild our lives and everything else after COVID. Now today we're starting a new series, and the new series is titled Under Construction. And with this series, we're going to be looking at the Old Testament book of Nehemiah. Now, Nehemiah faced a rebuilding project when he went to Jerusalem to help rebuild the wall around Jerusalem and to also help rebuild the city of Jerusalem itself. Now, Nehemiah faced many challenges as he rebuilt the wall of Jerusalem. Many of the challenges he faced are similar to the challenges that we face today as we are trying to rebuild our lives and rebuild just what we have lost over what has been destroyed over the past 2 years. Nehemiah knew that he knew what things looked like in the past. He sees the devastation and destruction that the exile has caused. And he knows that things must be done to get back to the way things were before. Okay? The exile is when the Babylonians came in and destroyed everything, destroyed the city, the wall, everything in Jerusalem, moved the people to Babylon and scattered them all throughout the Babylonian Empire. And this was 150 years. This happened 150 years before Nehemiah. okay? But the stories were passed down. So Nehemiah understands, and he knows what the destruction has caused. We are experiencing the same thing. We know how things once were. We see the state of things today, and we are seeing a vision for how they can be moving forward. Nehemiah faced many challenges, and we are facing many challenges today as well, as we continue to rebuild our lives, our careers, our relationships, and our churches. Today, we begin this series, and we're going to be looking at Nehemiah verses 1 through 4. We're just going to take a look at that introduction. Now, if you'd like to follow along as I read, Nehemiah is in the Old Testament. It's between the books of Ezra and Esther. And if you are using a traditional Bible, you can look in between those books in the Old Testament. But otherwise, you can access this passage on your phone or the device of your choice. The title of today's message is Great Trouble. So you can follow along as I read. I'm going to be reading Nehemiah chapter 1, verses 1 through 4. These are the words of Nehemiah, the son of Halakah. In the month of Kislev, in the 20th year, while I was in the citadel of Susa, Hanani, one of my brothers, came from Judah with other men, and I questioned them about the Jewish remnant had survived the exile, and also about Jerusalem. They said to me, "Those who survived the exile and are back in the province are in great trouble and disgrace. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down, and its gates have been burned with fire." When I heard these things, I sat down and wept. For days I mourned and fasted and prayed before the God of heaven. This is the word of the Lord. Now, Nehemiah begins by giving us some background information so that we know when and where the events that he is recording have taken place in history, because these are real historical events that have taken place. He tells us that it was in the month of Kislev, which is a month on the Jewish calendar, and it takes place around November or December, according to our calendar today. He is also telling us that it was the 20th year. Now, they marked the years by the reign of the king at the time. So this was the 20th year of the reign of Artaxerxes, which is around 445 BC. All right, just to give you some historical background as to when this all took place and why Nehemiah includes these details in his introduction here. Nehemiah also tells us that he was serving in the citadel of Susa. Now, Susa was a capital of Persia after Persia captured the Babylonians or captured Babylon. And the citadel, what a citadel basically is, it's a fortified palace that was built there in the capital. So Nehemiah is serving in a foreign country, in a foreign land, and he's serving foreign people. But he has a pretty good position serving in the palace. And at this time, many of the people of Judah, they were scattered and living throughout the Persian Empire. Now, this was because the people of Judah, they were taken into exile by the Babylonians. Okay, when the Babylonians captured and destroyed Jerusalem. When Babylon was conquered by the Persians, the people of Judah, they were allowed to return to Judah and Jerusalem. But some did, and they went back and they attempted to rebuild. But many did not, since it had been 70 years since they were taken into captivity by the Babylonians. Because many had established their lives where they were living. They were raising families, and they made a life for themselves where they were. So, many were just left, they moved on. They weren't going back to Jerusalem, but some did. They wanted to go back, and they wanted to rebuild. The younger generations didn't remember the past, only the stories that were handed down to them. Nehemiah and those who rebuilt Jerusalem, they weren't born in Jerusalem. They weren't born there. See, Nehemiah, he's about 40 when he receives this report from his brother. But Nehemiah was raised with a passion, and he was raised with a hope to return to the land that the Lord had promised his people. Nehemiah's brother Hanani went to Jerusalem to see how things were progressing there, since the people began to return. Now, the original people who left Persia to go back to Jerusalem, now they went back there about 90 years before Nehemiah's time. Jerusalem was destroyed 150 years before Nehemiah's time. And the original group went back to ruins to try and rebuild. And in the 90 years that they had, in the 90 years that they had been going back and trying to rebuild, they hadn't made much progress. Now, Ezra, his book is before Nehemiah's. He was part of rebuilding. His group went back and rebuilt the temple about 25 years prior to Nehemiah receiving this report. And still, there wasn't much progress made. The temple was rebuilt, but much of the city of Jerusalem and the wall hadn't been touched. So the report that Hanani gives Nehemiah was basically that the people were living in ruins still. They were still living in ruins. The report that Nehemiah received about the remnant that survived the exile was not good. He did not receive a good report. Nehemiah was told that those who survived the exile, they were in great trouble and disgrace. He was told that the wall had not been rebuilt and that the gates were also in ruin. The people living in Jerusalem were looked down on by the people living around them because of the state of the city and the wall not being rebuilt. See, an unwalled city was always considered like we would call a backwater town, because there was nothing of value in it, because why would you build a wall around something of value? So if there was no wall around the city, it was considered like a useless town. There was nothing of value to it. But the people who lived in an unwalled city, they lived in constant stress and tension, because they never knew when they may be attacked and brutalized. Okay, things were so much different back then. They were always in fear of being attacked. That's why they built walls around their cities, so that they could, kind of like thwart off attacks. So Jerusalem does not have a wall. It was broken down. It was torn down. It was no longer there. Hanani and Nehemiah had heard stories of how Jerusalem was attacked and how the city and the wall were destroyed and the people were taken into exile. But now they are seeing the destruction firsthand. Nehemiah is hearing about how desperate the situation really is in Jerusalem. What he's learning is basically that things haven't changed much over the past 150 years. That the people are still living in the ruins caused by their attackers. They are still living as a defeated people. They are being looked down on, and they are being ridiculed by all those living around them. It seemed that the people living in Jerusalem just didn't know how to move on. They didn't know how to get past the destruction of the city. They were stuck, and they were living in ruins and in squalor. And this had become the normal. This has become normal for them. And they just kind of settled in to this new kind of normal, where they were kind of living in kind of squalor. Now, many of you may be in the same place today, not knowing how or having the means to move on after the pandemic. You may be living among the ruins of your past glory. This may have become your normal, and you don't know any other way now. You remember what it was like, but you don't know how to get back to that. You don't know how to get back to, you know that things could be better, but you just don't know how to get there. Nehemiah knew how things could be. And he knew that they should be different. That the people didn't need to keep living this way. And that there were better days ahead. Now, Nehemiah was greatly distressed by the report that he received about the conditions in Jerusalem. He had a great care and concern for those who had been living in Jerusalem. Nehemiah may have had expectations of visiting a restored and thriving Jerusalem, but now with the report that he had just received, he knows that that is not going to happen. Nehemiah knew that the people of Jerusalem needed help and that they needed guidance, and he also knew where to find that help, where to find that guidance. Now, at first, Nehemiah was devastated by this news. He sat down and he wept for days. But then he decided that he was going to do something about it. Because Nehemiah knew that the people of Jerusalem, what they really needed was God. They needed God to intervene. And if God wasn't intervening, then they may not have been seeking the Lord. They needed to refocus. So Nehemiah began to fast and pray to God to intervene on behalf of the people of Jerusalem and to seek God's guidance. Nehemiah knew that the problems that the people of Jerusalem were facing, that they were beyond just what the people could do on their own. Now, we are in a similar situation today. There are things that we can and there are things that we should do to rebuild and restore our lives today. But those things alone will not solve all of the issues that we face. Like Nehemiah, we have to first see our problem and then seek the wisdom and the guidance of the Lord. Now, just like everyone else, we are facing the same issues of rebuilding here at Radiant Church. We have been through a lot over the past 2 years as well. We had to stop our live services just like everyone else did. The community center was closed. We had no place to meet. And even when the community center reopened, they had to put in a lot of restrictions in place, and we were not able to have live services because of the restrictions that needed to be put in place. So we just continued to meet online, which was fine at the time. But over the past 2 years, people have moved on or just simply stopped going to church. People became comfortable sleeping in on a Sunday morning and catching the message either live, or at their convenience during the week. Now, while online is good and we continue to be online and we will continue to increase our presence there, it isn't as good as meeting in person and working together as a community. We had a lot of things happen in the past that we are simply having difficulty, we're just having a difficult time reestablishing because we simply don't have the involvement that we used to have. We are looking not only to restore the good things that we had in the past, but we are also looking to grow in other areas to be a vital asset to our community. We have always seen church as more than just a place where we meet for an hour on a Sunday morning. So today we are under construction. We are rebuilding because we are not content to live in the ruins and devastation that COVID had brought upon us. We are all under construction in ways and very different ways as we rebuild our lives after COVID. Many things may never go back to what they once were, but that doesn't mean that you can't make them better than they once were. 2 years is a long time to live in limbo. It may have been necessary, but now it's time to start to rebuild and reconstruct. We received the report and the news was not good. The news still isn't that great, but we have a choice to make. We can either continue to live in squalor and in the ruins of the past, or we can move on. The task may seem overwhelming at times. It may even seem impossible. And you may just want to throw up your hands and give up. But we need to look to Nehemiah here and start where he started. Nehemiah started with going to God. Nehemiah fasted and he prayed and he sought the wisdom and the guidance of God. So this week, seek God's guidance and wisdom as you continue to rebuild after the effects of the pandemic. Fast and pray and look to him. Now you may be saying, I'm not a praying person. I wouldn't know where to start. Well, remember, a prayer is just talking to God. just like you would talk to someone else. Prayer is simply talking to God. God isn't looking for fancy words or some formula for you to use when you come to talk to him. He is only looking for words that come from your heart. Prayers don't have to be long, but they should be ongoing. You should never be in the habit of only praying when you need something from God. To seek and receive God's wisdom and guidance is an ongoing process. So prayer needs to be a daily practice. So start today. We may face great trouble. We may have faced great trouble in the past. And you may even be experiencing great trouble right now. But you don't have to remain defenseless against it. Go to God, and he will help you through it. We need to bear with one another as we are all under construction. But we will become stronger as we continue to rebuild under the wisdom and guidance of God. Amen. Well, thank you for joining us and spending a part of your Sunday with us. Every Sunday, we will be right here at 10 o'clock at the Forks Township Community Center for our live service. Our weekly message from Radiant Church, as always, goes out on Facebook Live at 10:30. And you can follow and connect with us on Facebook at Radiant Church PA and also on our website, radiantchurchpa.org. And throughout this week, as you go about your week, as you deal with all the things that you need to deal with, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord turn his face towards you and give you peace. Amen. Go in peace and have a great week.